Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Unbound Off Script. My name is Beth, and I talk a lot, and that's it. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with today's episode, and I got talking with somebody else here and decided, because I was telling them a story of something that happened to me a few days ago, that I would talk about that. And then in talking about that, I thought, why don't I tackle a couple more kind of really weird cases that are probably a bit more local to me. Some of them I'd never even heard of. So I thought it was pretty interesting to kind of dig a little bit and doing some research there. But anyway, I'm going to talk about a few days ago when I almost went into witness protection over a cup of medium roast. So I work out of my old house, the home office, if you will. My desk is facing out a window that faces the front of the house, right? So I'm just sitting there at my desk doing some work, just minding my own damn business, being a productive member of society or whatever. And I look up and out the window and there it is. The car. You know the one, right? It's jet black. You haven't seen it before. The windows are tinted so dark you'd think, I don't know, Batman was inside it. It's just sitting there. Normally, I'm not the nosy neighbor type, but this car is screaming, I have a subpoena or a silencer. Okay? So what do? I do what any rational terrified person does. I go into the kitchen and make a coffee, because if I'm going down, I'm going to go down caffeinated, for crying out loud. So I'm down there making the coffee, and suddenly, bam, 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 bam. It's on the door, my door. Not a, hey, it's Amazon knock. This was a, the government has questions knock. Okay. So I pull up the security cam, and there's a guy just standing there, total stranger. He's got his phone. He's looking at his phone. And I'm looking at the screen like, sir, I don't know you, and I certainly don't want whatever you're selling. You know, I'm not opening that door. There's no way. He lingers. He sticks something to the door. It looked like he did. So I thought, okay, well, maybe he's like delivering something and he's just leaving a notice card or so. I don't know. Like, it was really, 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 really weird. And then he just goes back to his dark tinted lair. But then he doesn't leave. So he just sits in the car for like 5 minutes, just watching. And I'm standing there with my coffee, peering through my plantation shutters like a protagonist in a low-budget spy thriller or something. He finally leaves, so I open the door and I grab the card that he had stuck in there, and my heart sinks because it's a business card for, I won't name the company, but it's Bailiffs. And the logo in the corner, this was really weird. Someone had aggressively scratched it out with a ballpoint pen because nothing says official government business like a do-it-yourself craft project on a business card, right? So immediately my brain goes into overdrive. Like, I'm spiraling, okay? I'm thinking, is it the podcast? Did I say something inflammatory? I mean, I'm very, very careful, and I check things with legal whatever, like, it's, I don't know. What did I do? Did I accidentally libel somebody? No, I'm a delight. Like, of course not. But then I start looking for someone to blame. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I have an almost 20-year-old. He doesn't get into much trouble. He's a pretty good kid overall. But what the hell did he do? And then I'm like, wait, what did Brian do? Brian's my first husband. I've mentioned him before. He's a total goody two-shoes, right? He probably accidentally stole a grape at the grocery store or something, and now the tactical unit's here to take the house. So now I'm down and ready to pack a go bag, okay? I'm checking my bank accounts. I'm wondering if I can pull off a fake mustache. And then I think, wait a minute, his name's on the card and his phone number's on the card. Adoy, why don't I just call this guy? So I do, and he answers pretty quickly. And I explained to him that I had his business card on my door and I was wondering what it was about. And he asked where I was and I told him. And he's like, oh, I guess I think maybe you're not the person I'm looking for. And then he names this guy. And then he's like, it's an Asian guy. Yep, that's not me. And I've owned this particular property for 20 years. So, you know, so it turns out the guy was at the wrong house, obviously, right? He knew as soon as I asked him what was up. Um, I don't know. I had such a visceral reaction to that entire situation. I don't know why. Like I've not done anything wrong. Like I mean, I may say some questionable things on social media, because I'm a little bit opinionated, but like I've not it didn't make sense, okay? And yes, it turned out to be a mistake, but that feeling of, the stranger at the door anxiety, I think it's something that we've all felt, right? Um and like, I don't know, like it's just, I think it's a very normal reaction that people have when something is kind of out of the ordinary and you're left for like that 5-minute period wondering what the fuck you've done or someone else has done. So yeah, that was that. And that conversation I had actually got me talking with someone here about a couple of other things. And like these are some kind of cold cases that are local to me, that I had absolutely no involvement in whatsoever. Just want to clear that up. I'm a good person. So the first one I want to talk about is in Mount Hope, which is a kind of a quiet community in Hamilton, Ontario. And this mystery kind of began with a puzzling discovery on an otherwise ordinary April evening, I would say. And this was back in 2007. This is the story of the Hamilton John Doe, and this is a man whose identity has kind of eluded investigators for nearly 2 decades. So it was April 7th, 2007. I think I have Saturday scratched down, so it must have been a Saturday. A 32-year-old figure skating coach was looking out from her home, just as I was at my desk that morning. And something unusual caught her eye. So sitting at the end of her driveway was this odd, kind of yellowy white object. She thought it was an animal's skull, so she kicked it across the road and it landed in a ditch. And she thought pretty much nothing more of it. But 2 days later, April 9th, around 6:30 in the evening, a neighbor was walking their dog along Glanbrook Road, and something in the ditch caught their attention, and they went over for a closer look and immediately realized that they were actually looking at a human skull. Hamilton police responded quickly, but initially told residents that an animal might have dug up the skull from a nearby cemetery. That theory didn't hold, though. A coroner determined the skull didn't come from any historical burial site, so this was something else entirely. Dr. Shelley Saunders, a forensic anthropologist and professor at McMaster University, was brought in to examine the remains. And on April 18th, 9 days after the skull's discovery, a massive search operation commenced. Okay, so Hamilton Police, their search and rescue team, OPP cadaver dogs, that's Ontario Provincial Police, and community volunteers combed through this heavily forested area near the intersection of Glancaster Road and Fiddler's Green Road. And at around 11, the cadaver dogs made another discovery. Additional skeletal remains were found in the woods, and they matched the skull. So who was this man? The autopsy couldn't determine a cause of death, but investigators were able to piece together some details about him. They estimate him to be between 40 and 65 when he died, likely sometime in the summer or fall of 2006, though he could have died as early as spring 2006 or even fall 2005. They think he stood somewhere between 5'6" and 6 feet tall. His hair gray to white, about 2 to 3 inches long. His dental health told a story of hardship. He had no upper teeth and likely hadn't for many years because the sockets had healed over. It's likely he wore a full upper denture and possibly lower partial denture. He had 6 teeth remaining in his lower jaw that were poorly cared for. They were riddled with untreated cavities and no fillings. And it appeared as though he suffered from chronic abscesses on both sides of his jaw. What he was wearing as well provided additional clues. He was wearing blue denim Wrangler jeans, 34 by 34. I didn't write down the brand of the shirt, so sorry about that. He was wearing a blue denim Kingswood brand long sleeve button down shirt, size large. He had a black belt, white Fruit of the Loom underwear, one white left running shoe, size 9.5, and its partner was presumably lost to time or the elements. He also had a watch he was wearing on his left wrist, and it was a water-resistant U.S. Army band wristwatch with a distinctive blue face. This wasn't a cheap timepiece. It would have cost probably between $300 and $450 and had only been available since 2003. So for a man with such poor dental care, this expensive watch kind of raised questions, right? Was it a treasured possession of some sort, a gift? Who knows? So DNA was successfully extracted from his femur and entered into databases for comparison with missing persons cases. Despite multiple attempts to match him to known missing persons, he's never been identified. So investigators don't suspect foul play, which kind of deepens the mystery. Like, how does someone die in a forest near Hamilton and just kind of vanish from the world without anyone reporting them missing? I hate that so much about a lot of these cases. When I was talking about the one out of Sumter County, I hated that those people went over 40 years with nobody missing them and nobody reporting them missing. Like that I just find that so sad. And the location, Fiddler's Green Road and Glancaster Road, where his remains were kind of scattered by animals before he was discovered. This is where possibly someone's father, brother, friend, whatever, he came to rest unknown and unmourned. And so it's been 19 years now since, that figure skating coach kicked what she thought was an animal skull across the road. There's got to be people somewhere who knew this man, right? Or wonder what became of him. I don't know. Maybe they've searched or given up hope. I don't know. I just find it sad. Maybe they have no idea the person they once knew is still waiting to be named. They may not even know he's missing, right? So Hamilton police are holding his DNA and still hoping for a match. We have advancing forensic genealogy that has solved decades-old cold cases. So hopefully, the Hamilton John Doe will one day become someone's remembered loved one again. Hamilton police asks people to contact them directly if anyone's listening to this and they think they might have any information, or maybe, they're missing somebody. I don't know. It's wild to me. It's wild to me that it's been almost 19 years and nobody's found him. Back to when I was wondering, what did Brian and crew do? It reminded me of how little we actually know about the people we trust, right? I got my mitts on some unsealed OPP, Ontario Provincial Police documents last week for this one. So cottage country here in Ontario, Muskoka, very, very, very popular place. A lot of celebrities, American, Canadian, and even tourists flock to these like picture perfect lakes, right? And these dense forests. There's a story of Joan Lawrence, known to locals as the Cat Lady, and the landlords who police believe may have murdered her, and at least 3 other vulnerable seniors. So this is the Lawn family of Huntsville, Ontario. So for years, Joan Lawrence was a fixture on the streets of Huntsville. She was 77 and she could be seen every day walking up and down the main road there, plastic bags in hand, filled with groceries and food for her beloved pet cats, right? She was a former freelance copywriter for Chatelaine, which was a magazine here in Canada, and the Toronto Star. She had fallen on hard times after a fire destroyed her house in 1994, and she survived on an $800 a month pension. And she kind of drifted between boarding houses and shelters. But she wanted more space for her cats, and that's when she encountered the Lawns. And the Lawn family had become fixtures in Huntsville around 1970, when Ann Lawn and his wife Shirley moved their 7 children to this wooded lakefront farm on North Lancelot Road. By the 1990s, 3 of the Lawn brothers, David, Walter, and Paul, were operating what they called retirement homes across 3 different properties near Huntsville. These weren't licensed care facilities. They were rundown properties where vulnerable seniors paid between $400 and $750 a month to rent shared rooms and tiny outbuildings. So Joan Lawrence moved to what locals called the Lawn Farm. 68 acres. This property was owned by the three brothers, right? It was gated and marked no trespassing and beware of dog signs and all that kind of stuff. And the property kind of kept Lawrence out of public sight, right? And, as police would later discover, the property was being used as a kind of a de facto landfill, mountains of junk scattered across the land, old snowmobiles and water heaters and drywall rusted ruins everywhere. But something was really, really wrong at this place. In the months before her disappearance, Joan Lawrence kind of started expressing concerns. So Linda Charbonneau, she was a deli manager at a local grocery store in 1998. She remembered Joan telling her that one of her landlords had taunted her by stepping on her cats. Don't fuck with cats. When Charbonneau asked why Lawrence used the restroom of a Huntsville fast food restaurant to bathe instead of the one at the farmhouse where resident Ron Allen lived, Lawrence said, "You just never know what he's going to do." Joan asked a social worker who lived nearby to call police if anything happened to her. She instructed the post office to give her mail only to her and not to the Lawns. And most tellingly, she approached a Huntsville law office for help. So in June 1998, Joan went to the law office to complain that her $744 income tax refund check had not arrived. And the staff helped her track it down and discovered it had been issued and cashed earlier that spring. And the signature on the back didn't match Lawrence's, so someone had stolen her money. So Lawrence and the firm kind of started building a case to take to the OPP. And in early October, staff told Lawrence that the paperwork was ready, but she never arrived to pick it up because she had vanished. So on November 25th, 1998, another resident of the farm told his probation officer that he hadn't seen Lawrence in a while. The probation officer relayed the information to police, and an OPP detective constable, Aaron Burke, was assigned to investigate, 28 years old. What she uncovered was chilling. So on December 17th, 1998, police descended on the lawn farm at dawn. They just drove right through the gate and down the long driveway. Detective Burke believed that somewhere along the rusted ruins and mountains of junk was the body of Joan Lawrence. Pretty easy to believe that. Makes a lot of sense, right? The investigation revealed a systematic pattern of abuse. Police documents unsealed years later after a court battle by CBC's The Fifth Estate, which is a show here, and the Walrus magazine showed that the Lawns were allegedly defrauding residents by stealing seniors' pension and benefit checks, giving alcohol to alcoholics, and abandoning seniors on these rural properties, right? So David Lawn, one of the brothers, even shared a bank account with Joan Lawrence and had access to it through a bank card. Within weeks of starting the investigation, Detective Burke suspected that David Lawn and Ron Allen had murdered Lawrence and disposed of her body to prevent her from reporting them for what she documented as frauds, thefts, mistreatment, and neglect. So 57-year-old Alan Marshall was another resident on the property and told police he heard gunshots and saw a backhoe being operated around the time of Lawrence's disappearance as well. But Joan wasn't the only one. So between 1998 and 2003, other people disappeared from properties connected to the Lawn family. All of them were elderly. All of them were clearly marginalized, if I could speak. All of them lived near Joan and had the same landlords. And police are investigating all 4 disappearances as possible murders. You don't say. So fast forward all the way to July 2019, more than 2 decades after Joan Lawrence vanished, OPP made a public appeal for new information. Detective Sergeant Rob Matthews asked anyone who may have avoided speaking to investigators 21 years ago to reconsider. The OPP confirmed they were investigating the disappearances of all 4 seniors as homicides. And yet, despite testimony about gunshots and backhoes, and despite evidence of financial exploitation and the systematic abuse of these vulnerable seniors, police have never charged anyone in the Lawrence case or any of the other disappearances. David, Walter, and Paul Lawn have never been convicted of any crimes related to these disappearances. Wild. The investigation remains open. Bodies have never been found, and the families of these missing seniors, if they exist, have never received answers. The Lawn family operated these retirement homes in plain sight in cottage country, taking in society's most vulnerable, the sweet old people, the poor, with people without family or advocates or anything, and they collected their pension checks and moved them between properties. And when questions were asked, the residents simply disappeared into the forests and lakes of Muskoka. Really? And we're just not going to do anything about these three. Really? Yeah, Joan was this sweet cat lady who walked Huntsville streets every day with plastic bags full of food for her little kitty cats, and she became invisible when she needed to be seen the most. She was just reduced to a missing persons case that has haunted cottage country for more than 25 years. Somewhere in those 68 acres of the lawn farm, among the snowmobiles and the water heaters and all that crap, police believe she's there, and, probably right alongside the others who came seeking shelter and found something a hell of a lot darker. Of course, the Lawn family's retirement homes are no longer in operation, but questions remain. What happened on those gated properties? Where are the bodies? Why haven't the police done more to search? And how many others might there be? Joan deserves to be found. They all do. And the last case I want to talk about, just down the road, just down the QEW into Oakville. This was in September of 1982. 25-year-old Delia Adriano said goodbye to her fiancé and walked towards the side entrance of her parents' home in Oakville, Ontario. She never made it inside. What happened in the hour that followed would become one of Ontario's most haunting unsolved murders. This is a case where witnesses actually heard screams and saw a struggle and watched a car drive away into the darkness. But here we are, more than 4 decades later, and her killer remains free. This was September 26th, 1982. Just a regular Sunday for Delia Adriano and her fiancé, Danny Dutra. They spent the day together doing what probably every couple does, right? Watching TV or sports, enjoying a barbecue with friends, whatever. As the evening kind of drew to a close, about 9:30, Danny dropped Delia off at her parents' home on Wildwood Drive in Oakville. Delia walked toward the side entrance of the house, and Danny drove away. And then Delia vanished. Where the timeline becomes critical and where so many questions kind of remain unanswered, at about 10:30, so this was a full hour after she was dropped off, witnesses in the area of Wildwood Drive and Slade Crescent reported hearing a woman screaming. They looked outside and they saw a young woman who matched Delia's description being forced into a dark, subcompact vehicle by a man. It was 1 hour. It was 60 minutes between when her fiancé dropped her off and when witnesses heard the screams. So did Delia ever make it inside the house? And if she did, why did she go back outside? Did someone call and ask her to meet them? Did someone ring the doorbell? Or did something happen immediately after Danny left and the witnesses were simply mistaken about the time? The lack of details about this missing hour has kind of plagued investigators all this time. It's a gap in the timeline that could hold the key to everything. What they do know, witnesses reported seeing what appeared to be a couple arguing. The struggle wasn't silent. It was loud, it was visible, and it was disturbing enough that multiple people took notice, right? The woman was forced into the vehicle, and the argument continued inside the car for about 5 minutes before the vehicle drove away with its lights turned off. The next morning, her purse, Delia's purse, was found on the sidewalk near where witnesses had seen the abduction happen. So for 6 weeks, her family waited for answers. Her fiancé was quickly cleared by police. Her tight-knit Portuguese community rallied, searching, hoping, praying, and then on November 6th, 1982, woodcutter Del Parcham made a grim discovery in a wooded area known locally as Lover's Lane, near the intersection of Third Side Road and Second Line in Milton, which is more than 20 miles from Oakville. Delia's nude body was just thrown in amongst the trees. So 6 weeks of decomp made it impossible for the coroner to determine a cause of death. They couldn't definitively confirm whether she had been sexually assaulted, though the fact that her body was found nude strongly suggested it. The forensics that might have told her story have been erased by time and elements, but investigators had other evidence to work with, right? They had witness descriptions, they had a timeline, even though it wasn't exactly perfect, and they had a composite sketch of the suspect, too. So the man was described as white, between 5'7" and 5'9", with a medium build and brown hair, feathered back to his neck, a style that was kind of popular in the early 80s. He drove a dark blue 2-door subcompact Chevrolet Chevette or something similar with 3 distinctive stripes along the side and Ontario license plates. I couldn't find any information on what the plates were. The car had been seen parked in the driveway of a model home sales office nearby. Detective Keith Wostra, who led the investigation, explained to reporters that witnesses believed that they were watching a domestic dispute, something between a husband and a wife or a boyfriend and girlfriend, right? The argument didn't sound like strangers. They said it sounded personal and familiar, and this led investigators to a crucial theory. Delia knew her killer. And there's another telling detail as well. The family dog didn't bark when Delia interacted with the man on the street. Dogs typically bark at strangers, right? They don't bark at people they know. Delia was part of a very close-knit Portuguese community in Oakville, and investigators believe it's possible her killer was someone from within that community, someone who maybe knew the family, or someone she trusted enough to approach, or even get into a car with, at least initially. So over the years, investigators have looked at potential connections to other cases. In recent years, some have wondered about possible links to other unsolved murders from the same era, right? Cases involving young women, similar circumstances, similar timelines. There's a man named Larry Talbot who came onto police radar in connection with another murder of Christine Prince, but he died in 2008 before any connections could be explored. Some people have also questioned, and this was my first thought too, whether there could be any connection to Russell Williams, former Canadian Forces colonel who was convicted of multiple murders and sexual assaults, though there's no public evidence suggesting any link to Delia's case, and the description doesn't match or anything, but that was my first thought before I really read the details. Anyway, what remains is a case that's built on that crucial last hour, right? That 60 minutes between safety and abduction. 40 years later, she was 25. She was engaged to be married. She had her whole damn life ahead of her. And someone took all that away that night. And somewhere someone has to know what happened, Maybe they saw the car or knew the man. Maybe he's said something, is he out there alive, still living, just living a normal life? Was he part of that tight-knit Portuguese community? And who knows? And has anyone heard anything in that community? Do they have suspicions or rumors that were never reported to police? The killer himself, is he now in his 60s or 70s? Is he carrying the weight of what he did to her that night? I don't know. Her sister has spoken publicly about the case over the years, telling reporters that the family's still waiting for answers. They're still waiting for justice. And 4 decades is a long time to wait and a long time to wonder. Halton Regional Police Service continues to investigate this murder as an unsolved homicide. Again, this advanced DNA tech and forensic genealogy, there's always hope that evidence preserved from 82 might finally give some answers. Have to say it, if you have any information about the murder of Delia Adriano, Halton Regional Police ask that you contact their homicide unit at 905-825-4747, extension 8760. Our Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. Someone out there knows what happened. Someone knows what happened in that lost hour. Someone knows who forced her into that car and drove away. Someone knows why she never made it inside her house that night. She deserves justice. Her family deserves answers. After all this time, again, just like the Sumter County does, for over 40 years, it's time for the truth to finally come out. So yeah, that black car at my door, that was nothing. That was the wrong address. It gave me a heart attack. Scratched out logo on a business card. Cute. Bailiffs looking for someone who wasn't me. But yeah, for a few minutes there, my brain, my poor overactive brain went to all the dark places. Because we've been conditioned to think that way, right? A stranger at the door, knock we're not expecting, a car that doesn't belong, a business card that you don't expect to get. Honestly, maybe the instinct isn't so irrational. I think that these cases remind us that sometimes the danger isn't a stranger in a black car. Sometimes it's the landlord you trust with your pension check, or a dog that doesn't bark at someone else, right? Who knows? I don't know. I think the scariest part isn't the knock at the door. It's the silence that follows when someone doesn't answer it anymore, right? Thank you so much for being here. Please make sure to follow me wherever you listen to me so when new episodes come out, you'll be notified. And remember, all episodes of Unbound are free. If you want to support the production costs or keep me from running ads and interruptions, you can find me on Coffee, but there's never any obligation. The content will always be free. Always. Support and contact info is in the show notes. And if you join the Facebook group, we sometimes have further conversation there. I will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit authorbethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.